I'm Bill Alexy, and I authored the article, The Analyst Rorschach, a gateway to opening the dialectical field. Prior to beginning my analytic training at the Jung Institute, I was a bit of a Rorschach warrior. I used it in my clinical practice for describing personality organization and functioning. And I think an aspect of Rorschach assessment that always kept me enthralled was the unending potential it seemed to have for discovering more about the individual as a unique person. So all through my analytic training, I wondered about the compatibility of Rorschach assessment and Jungian analysis. Could the two be brought together? And if so, how? There was a time when I thought about Rorschach responses as complex indicators and reflected on the meaning of elaborated Rorschach responses and the potential they held for releasing archetypal energies. But none of this felt very alive for me, and my attitude was one of patiently waiting to see if something might be served up that would be important to my awareness. And then there was a series of 3 synchronistic events. Event number 1. During my first case colloquium write-up and presentation, it was noted that I reported relatively little about my patient's family of origin history. And when this was brought to my attention, I realized immediately that because I had been closed off to details about my own family of origin history, I had in effect unconsciously shut down my patient from revealing more about this aspect of her life. When I next met with my patient, she began to reveal much more about her family of origin history. I had not consciously encouraged her to do this, nor had I discovered anything more about my own, and so I concluded that there was something about my dawning awareness of the issue alone, that is, of how I had shut her down, that corresponded with my patient becoming more forthcoming about her own history, the power of unconscious communication. The second event had to do with knowing my interest in Rorschach assessment. My personal analyst asked me if I had ever taken the Rorschach. I told her that I had not, and she said, "Isn't that a bit like an analyst who has never been analyzed?" I immediately disagreed with what she said, but I found her question to be so compelling that I soon thereafter arranged to have the Rorschach administered to me by a competent psychodiagnostician. The third event, not long before I learned of my Rorschach findings, my supervising analyst asked if I would be including my Rorschach findings in my thesis. His question threw me off. Why would I include my Rorschach finding? I was perplexed and responded by saying that I suppose I would if it seemed warranted. And then there was a moment when these 3 events spontaneously came to my mind as though they were a unit. I realized that I was to view the colloquium experience as a template for how my own Rorschach findings were to be put to good use. My thesis topic came into focus, which was how an awareness of my own Rorschach findings informed and had some correspondence with what constellated in the analytic field. The article describes 5 of my Rorschach findings, and they all spoke to manifestations of a not being enough as I am complex in my life. As I recalled memories that had to do with the origins of this complex in my life, I also wondered about the importance that analysts in general give to consciously recognizing the influence of their specific wounds in corresponding complexes on the development of their analytic relationships. The findings from my Rorschach brought to clearer consciousness manifestations of a core complex in my life. Importantly, the findings identified areas of vulnerability that had the potential for characterizing the nature of countertransference phenomenon. As such, I have come to view countertransference vulnerability as the analyst's susceptibility to hooking patient perceptions in a way that potentially perpetuates dissociated ways of relating to each other. And in the article, I present some case material where I attempt to demonstrate the influence of my newfound awareness about myself and how that corresponded to what changed in the analytic field. My conclusion: with patience, I envision a modified, more refined use of the Rorschach, where conversation around particular Rorschach cards associated with pertinent archetypal themes might help to facilitate a timely integration of psychic material. And with analysts, I envision their being willing to involve themselves in some kind of exploratory image-making activity, such as the Rorschach, that would serve to heighten consciousness of counter-transference vulnerabilities, thereby facilitating the analytic work.